Talk about the relationship between May Day and what UNAC is organizing in Chicago on the 20th of May.
So the United National Anti-War Coalition is organizing a protest against NATO and the G8 on May 20th in Chicago, and that's to protest the war makers and the bankers of the rich countries, the Europe and the US. And the relationship to May Day is that May Day, which was started in Chicago around the workers' strike for the 8-hour day, they actually executed some of the leading organizers of the day, all of whom were not at the actual protest that they were charged with crimes for being at. But they hung 5 of them, and the rest they were led off by the governor Altgeld, who then lost his position as governor after that. Anyway, today we're seeing around the world that there's protest in support of workers and unions and against wars of empire. So the relationship for us is that we're opposed to the war in Afghanistan, as is nearly 70% of our country. But still, the war makers won't stop, because the bankers and the big corporations, they want the resources of the rest of the world, and they want to exploit labor not just here at home, which they do with expertise, but in every other country too. We can never satisfy the profit making of the corporations. We need to start another world, a better world that serves the people instead of the big banks. So that's why we're here today on May Day.
How do you respond to folks who, you know, at least maybe had a belief or still sort of holding firm to this notion that with the Obama administration that Afghanistan, unlike Iraq, is sort of a good war, and that we need to sort of support the administration's reasonings for sort of being there?
Well, even our own even the U.S. soldiers don't want to be in Afghanistan anymore, and with the murders committed by that soldier a month or two ago, it's just clear that it's time for the U.S. to end its war there. While that atrocity by that one soldier was terrible, every week drones and other units are sent out to kill Afghan civilians. It's like the U.S. is committing a 9/11 every few months in Afghanistan. And it's related to the war in Iraq and the attempts to militarily harass Syria and Iran. The U.S. corporations just want to control all the materials in the Middle East, in particular oil. And so it's time to go. The troops are ready to come home. We're demanding they be brought home now.
Certainly have been a fair amount of media coverage about how difficult it's been for you all to organize this demonstration, these activities in Chicago, in terms of, you know, the government, you know, not willing to initially give a permit, to just sort of maybe turning Chicago into sort of a bit of a police state for that for those several days the actions are going on there. I mean, what if people go to Chicago for the protest on the 20th? What can they expect?
They can expect to see their neighbors. They can expect to see people from Chicago walking with their school-age children. They can expect to see retired union workers next to them marching through the streets of Chicago. And who else has joined the movement in the past few weeks? Jesse Jackson has agreed to come and speak and help lead the march. 5 or 6 big unions in Chicago and Illinois have agreed to join the march. Unions from Wisconsin and Minnesota are sending their members to march next to the anti-war protesters. And best of all, Iraq Veterans Against the War have agreed to lead the march. And after we march on the bankers and the war makers of NATO and the G8, we're going to have a ceremony where the veterans of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq return their medals to the U.S. government as a sign of their protest of the continued war policies of the current government as well as Bush. If Obama wants to continue Bush's wars, we're going to protest them and protest the future wars as well. So that's what people can expect. We think that the movements by the federal government and Rahm Emanuel, who used to be my congressman, by the way, we think that it's all maneuvers to try to suppress protest, try to suppress free speech, try to suppress the freedom of organization, that people come together to make protests happen. And we reject it. So we've done a campaign to say, come march with us, because we're going to build a different country than either of the political parties sees right now. We need a movement in the streets like Martin Luther King led, and like the 60s anti-war movement combined together, and the union movement combined together to make a new country.